Chapter 1. The Voice in the Night, London, 1936. The city hummed under a velvet sky, its streets alive with the clatter of late-night taxis and the distant laughter of pub-goers. But in thousands of homes, families huddled around their wireless sets, tuned to the warm, crackling voice of Victor Langston, host of Midnight Mysteries. His show, broadcast live from the stately Imperial Broadcasting House, was a weekly ritual, blending suspenseful tales with witty banter. Tonight, Langston's voice filled the airwaves with a promise of intrigue. "And so, dear listeners," Langston purred, his baritone smooth as polished oak, "we come to the question that haunts every great mystery. Who stands to gain from a perfect crime?" A pause, heavy with theatrical flair. "My co-host, Mr. Edmund Blake, believes the answer lies in passion. But I say, greed, always greed." In parlours across England, listeners leaned closer to their radios. In the studio, a small soundproofed room lined with mahogany panels, Langston sat at a polished table, a microphone dangling above him like a spider on its thread. Across from him, Edmund Blake, lean and sharp-eyed, smirked, ready to retort. Behind the glass in the control booth, producer Margaret Hale adjusted dials, her face taut with focus, while sound engineer Thomas Reed monitored the equipment, his fingers dancing over switches. Blake leaned into his microphone. "Passion, Victor, is a fire that burns hotter than gold. A lover scorned will pull a trigger faster than a miser robbed." Langston chuckled, his eyes glinting. "Spoken like a poet, Edmund, but poetry doesn't pay for bullets. Now, let us ask our listeners, what drives a man to murder? Write to us at Imperial Broadcasting House, and perhaps your letter will grace our next." A sharp crack shattered the air. Langston's voice cut off. In the control booth, Margaret froze, her hand hovering over a dial. Reed's head snapped up, his eyes wide. Blake stared at Langston, who slumped forward, a crimson stain blooming across his pristine white shirt. The microphone caught the faint thud of his body hitting the table, broadcasting it to thousands of horrified listeners. For a moment, silence gripped the studio. Then Margaret's voice barked through the intercom. "Thomas, cut the feed, now!" Reed fumbled with the controls, and the broadcast died, replaced by static across England's airwaves. Blake shoved back his chair, his face pale. He's dead! Victor's dead!" Margaret burst into the studio, her heels clicking on the polished floor. She checked Langston's pulse, her fingers trembling. "No pulse! Thomas, call the police!" Reed, still in the booth, grabbed the telephone, his voice shaking as he dialed. The studio door, locked from the inside during the broadcast to prevent interruptions, remained sealed. The windows, small and high, were bolted shut. The murder weapon, a gun presumably, was nowhere to be seen. By the time the police arrived, the scene was chaos. Constables cordoned off the studio, their notebooks open, while the suspects, Blake, Margaret and Reed, stood in the corridor, each claiming innocence. The news spread like wildfire. Victor Langston, radio's golden voice, had been murdered live on air in a locked room with no trace of the killer. At midnight, a small, immaculate figure stepped into the Imperial Broadcasting House. Hercule Poirot, his moustache gleaming under the gaslights, surveyed the scene with eyes like polished agates. Chief Inspector Japp, trailing behind, looked harried, his tie askew. "Poirot, thank heavens you're here," Japp said, mopping his brow. "It's a right mess. Langston shot dead during his own broadcast. Studio locked, no gun, no killer. The whole country heard it happen." Poirot's lips curved into a faint smile. "The whole country, you say? Then the audience, it is vast, but the stage, it is small. A locked room, a gunshot, and a voice silenced. Yet the truth it speaks if one listens closely." He stepped toward the studio door, his cane tapping lightly. "Let us begin, mon ami, with the room that keeps its secrets so well. And then we shall hear what the voices, living and dead, have to say. Before we move on, detective, where in the world are you solving mysteries with us? Drop your location in the comments. And if you're craving more twisted tales, hit subscribe. Tomorrow's case file gets even darker. Stay sharp. Chapter 2. The Locked Room. The studio of Midnight Mysteries was a cocoon of silence, its mahogany walls absorbing sound as greedily as they had once amplified Victor Langston's voice. Hercule Poirot stood at the centre, his small frame dwarfed by the room's grandeur, yet his presence commanded it. The air smelled faintly of wax polish and cigarette smoke, undercut by the metallic tang of blood. Langston's body had been removed, but a dark stain marred the table where he had fallen, and the microphone still hung above, a mute witness to the crime. Chief Inspector Japp paced near the door, his boots scuffing the polished floor. "It's impossible, Poirot. The door was locked from the inside. Langston himself bolted it before the broadcast, as always. The windows are sealed, too high to reach without a ladder, and not a soul saw anyone leave. Yet someone shot him, and the guns vanished." Poirot tilted his head, his eyes scanning the room with the precision of a watchmaker. "Impossible, you say, mon ami? The word, it is a challenge to the little grey cells. Let us examine this locked room and see what it whispers." He approached the door, a heavy oak slab with a single bolt on the inside. He tested it, sliding the bolt back and forth. Simple, yet effective. "And you confirm, Inspector, that this was locked when the police arrived?" "Dead certain," Japp replied. "Margaret Hale and Thomas Reed had to break it open after the gunshot. Took a fire-axe to the lock." Poirot's gaze flicked to the windows, small rectangles set near the ceiling, their frames rusted shut. He tapped his cane against the floor, thoughtful. "No entry, no exit, and the weapon? Not a trace," Japp said, exasperated. "We've searched every inch, studio, control booth, even the corridors. It's as if the killer spirited it away." "Or," Poirot murmured, "the killer was never here at all." His words hung in the air, cryptic as he turned to the table. A notepad, a glass of water, and Langston's fountain pen lay untouched. Poirot lifted the pen, inspecting its gleaming nib. Order, precision. Monsieur Langston was a man of habit, no? Before Japp could answer, a sharp voice cut through the room. He was a tyrant, if that's what you mean. Margaret Hale stood in the doorway, her arms crossed. The producer's auburn hair was pinned tightly, but her eyes betrayed a flicker of unease. Victor ran this show like a dictator. Every word scripted, every pause timed. If you're looking for enemies, you'll need a longer notebook. Poirot's moustache twitched. Madame Hale, your candour is refreshing. Tell me, where were you when the shot was fired? In the control booth, with Thomas, she said, her tone clipped. We heard the shot through the speakers, same as the listeners. I told Thomas to cut the feed, then we broke into the studio. Victor was already dead. And you, Monsieur Blake? Poirot turned to the co-host, who lounged against the wall, his handsome face pale but composed. Edmund Blake's suit was impeccably tailored, though a faint tremor in his hand betrayed his nerves. I was right there, Blake said, pointing to the chair opposite Langston's. We were mid-banter when, bang! I thought it was a prank. At first, some sound effect gone wrong. Then I saw the blood. He shuddered, his voice dropping. I didn't move, I swear. I just sat there, frozen. Poirot's eyes narrowed. And you saw no one else in the room? No movement, no shadow? Nothing, Blake said, too quickly. Just Victor, then. Nothing. Poirot turned to the control booth, visible through a thick glass pane. Thomas Reed, the sound engineer, stood inside, fidgeting with a screwdriver. His wiry frame and ink-stained fingers suggested a man more comfortable with machines than people. Poirot beckoned him out. Monsieur Reed, you controlled the broadcast, oui? Tell me, what did you hear? What did you see? Reed swallowed, his Adam's apple bobbing. I was monitoring the levels, like always. Victor and Edmund were talking, everything normal. Then the shot. It was loud, sharp, right through the mic. I looked up, saw Victor slump. Margaret yelled, to cut the feed, so I did. That's all. Poirot studied the booth's equipment. Dials, switches, and a tangle of wires. A marvel, this technology. It captures the voice, sends it to the world. But could it also deceive? Reed blinked. Deceive? I don't follow. Perhaps you will in time, Poirot said, his tone light but probing. He turned back to the group, his gaze sweeping over them. A locked room, a missing weapon, and 3 witnesses, each with eyes and ears, yet none saw the killer. Curious, no? But there is another witness, one we have not yet questioned. Japp frowned. Who's that? The audience, Poirot said, his voice soft but firm. Thousands heard the murder live through their wireless sets, and among them, perhaps, is one who knows more than they should. Madame Hale, you receive letters from listeners, we? Margaret nodded. Hundreds a week. Victor loved reading them on air. Then we shall begin there, Poirot said. For now, I ask you all to remain at the station. The truth, it is like a broadcast. It travels far. but it begins in a single room. As the suspects dispersed, Japp leaned close. "What's your game, Poirot? You think one of them's lying?" Poirot smiled enigmatically. "Lying, mon ami? Perhaps. But the lie, it is not always in the words. Sometimes it is in the silence." Chapter 3. Voices of Suspicion. The Imperial Broadcasting House was a labyrinth of corridors, its walls adorned with framed posters of midnight mysteries and portraits of radio stars. Hercule Poirot sat in a small office, commandeered for his interviews, its desk cluttered with scripts and coffee-stained mugs. A single lamp cast a warm glow, softening the edges of the room, but not the tension in the air. Chief Inspector Japp stood by the door, arms crossed, as Poirot prepared to unravel the threads of suspicion. First to enter was Margaret Hale, the producer, her posture rigid as she settled into the chair. Her auburn hair was still pinned tightly, but a stray lock betrayed her composure. Poirot's eyes, sharp as a falcon's, studied her. "Madame Hale," he began, his voice smooth as velvet. "You described Monsieur Langston as a tyrant. Strong words, non? Perhaps you could elaborate." Margaret's lips tightened. Victor was brilliant, but he was impossible. He controlled every detail. Scripts, timing, even the brand of tea in the studio. If you crossed him, he'd cut you down with a smile. I worked 16-hour days to keep his show perfect, and he never once said thank you. Poirot leaned forward, his moustache twitching. And this resentment, it grew, enough, perhaps, to wish him harm. Her eyes flashed. "I didn't kill him, if that's what you're implying. I was in the control booth when it happened. Thomas can vouch for me. Besides, I needed Victor. His show paid my bills." "Needed, yet resented," Poirot mused. "A curious balance. Tell me, madam, did you notice anything unusual during the broadcast? A sound, a glance, a moment out of place?" Margaret hesitated, her fingers twisting a silver bracelet. "It was all so fast. The shot, Victor falling. I don't know. Maybe Edmund looked odd, like he was expecting something. But I was focused on the controls." Poirot made a mental note. "Merci, madame. You may go, but stay close." Next came Edmund Blake, the co-host, his charm dimmed by fatigue. He slouched in the chair, his tie loosened, and lit a cigarette with a trembling hand. The smoke curled upward, catching the lamplight. "Monsieur Blake," Poirot said, "you sat across from Monsieur Langston when he died. A front-row seat to murder, yet you saw nothing. How is this possible?" Blake exhaled sharply. "I told you, it happened in a blink. We were sparring, like always. Victor loved to needle me on air. Then the shot rang out and he was gone. I was too shocked to move." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Shocked, yet you thought it a prank at first. A curious reaction, no? Tell me, what was your relationship with Langston off the air?" Blake's jaw tightened. "We weren't mates, if that's what you mean. Victor was the star, and he made sure I knew it. Always stealing my lines, hogging the spotlight, but I didn't hate him enough to kill him. Perhaps not hate, Poirot said softly. But jealousy? A man like you with talent, ambition, yet always in another's shadow. It stings, does it not? Blake stubbed out his cigarette, his voice low. I was in the studio, under a microphone, with half of England listening. If I'd pulled a trigger, don't you think someone would have noticed? Poirot smiled enigmatically. Perhaps they did, monsieur, but not with their eyes. Where were you before the broadcast began? In the green room, rehearsing lines, Blake said. Margaret saw me there. So did the tea-girl, Lucy. Lucy? Poirot's eyebrows rose. A new name. We shall speak with her. Merci, Monsieur Blake. Last was Thomas Reed, the sound engineer, who shuffled in, his hands stuffed in his pockets. His spectacles slid down his nose, and he pushed them up nervously. Poirot gestured to the chair. Monsieur Reed, you are the maestro of sound. Every whisper, every note passes through your hands. Tell me, what did you hear in the moments before the shot? Reed fidgeted. Just the usual. Victor and Edmund bantering, the hum of the equipment. The shot was sudden, loud, like a firecracker. I didn't hear anything else. Poirot tilted his head. And your relationship with Monsieur Langston? Was he, as Madame Hale said, a tyrant to you? Reed's cheeks flushed. Victor was demanding. He'd yell if the sound wasn't perfect, but I liked my job. I didn't have any reason to hurt him. Yet you were alone in the booth for parts of the broadcast, no? Poirot's tone was gentle but probing. A man with your skill could perhaps manipulate what the audience hears. Reed's eyes widened. I didn't tamper with anything. I was just doing my job. Margaret was with me most of the time. She'll tell you. Poirot nodded, his expression unreadable. One final question, monsieur. The listener letters, do you ever read them before they reach Monsieur Langston? Sometimes, Reed admitted. I sort them. Pass the good ones to Margaret. Most are just fans gushing, but some are odd. One came last week, no signature, just a line about paying for old sins. I thought it was a prank. Poirot's eyes gleamed. A prank or a promise? Bring me this letter, Monsieur Reed. It may speak louder than you know. As Reed left, Japp stepped forward, scratching his head. Well, Poirot, they're all pointing fingers, but nobody's budging. What's your take? Poirot tapped his cane against the floor, his voice thoughtful. Each has a motive, mon ami. Resentment, jealousy, perhaps fear. Each has an alibi, yet each saw something they cannot explain. The truth, it hides in the gaps between their stories. And this letter, it may be the key to a voice that speaks from the shadows. Chapter 4. The Echo of the Past. The archives of the Imperial Broadcasting House were a crypt of forgotten voices, tucked beneath the grand studios in a basement lined with steel cabinets. Dust motes danced in the light of a single bulb as Hercule Poirot, his gloves pristine despite the grime, sifted through files with the care of an archaeologist. Chief Inspector Japp, less patient, leaned against a cabinet, flipping through a ledger. "Blasted paperwork," Japp muttered. You sure? This is worth it, Poirot. We've got suspects upstairs tripping over their own lives, and you're down here chasing ghosts. Poirot's eyes gleamed as he extracted a yellowed clipping from a folder. Ghosts, mon ami, have a way of haunting the living. Monsieur Langston's past, it is not so silent as he wished. Regardez, this article from 1932. Japp peered over Poirot's shoulder. The headline read, Radio stars rise marred by scandal. Partner ousted amid fraud claims. The article detailed how Victor Langston, then an up-and-coming broadcaster, had been accused of sabotaging his co-host, Arthur Grayson, by planting evidence of financial misconduct. Grayson was sacked, his reputation ruined, and Langston took sole control of their show, which later became Midnight Mysteries. Grayson, Japp said, whistling. Sounds like a man with an axe to grind. Think he's our killer? Poirot's moustache twitched. A motive, oui, but a method. That remains to be seen. Grayson disappeared after the scandal. Some say to ruin, others to obscurity. We must find him, or what remains of his shadow. Their conversation was interrupted by Thomas Reed, who appeared at the basement door, clutching a thin envelope. His spectacles glinted nervously in the dim light. Monsieur Poirot, you asked for the listener letter. I found it in the sorting room. Poirot took the envelope with a nod. Merci, Monsieur Reed. Your diligence is noted. Tell me, this letter, when did it arrive? Last Tuesday, Reed said, shifting his weight. I didn't think much of it at first, but after what happened it seemed important. Poirot opened the envelope, revealing a single sheet of cheap paper. The words, typed in stark black ink, read, The voice of the past will silence the present. Sins are not forgotten. No signature, no return address. Japp frowned. Cryptic nonsense. Could be a crank. Or a warning, Poirot said softly, folding the letter. The past, it speaks loudly in this case. Monsieur Reed, who else saw this letter? Just me and Margaret, Reed said. Victor usually picked the letters to read on air, but this one, I didn't show him. It felt wrong. Poirot's eyes narrowed. Wrong or dangerous? You may go, monsieur, but think carefully on what you have not said. As Reed retreated, Poirot turned to Japp. We must trace this letter, mon ami, and we must find Arthur Grayson. His name, it is a thread in this tapestry of deceit. Later, in the station's bustling tea-room, Poirot sought out Lucy, the tea-girl Blake had mentioned. She was a slight young woman, barely 20, with wide eyes and a nervous habit of tugging at her apron. She set a cup of tea before Poirot, her hands trembling slightly. Mademoiselle Lucy, Poirot said, his tone gentle. You move quietly through this station, seeing much, saying little. Tell me, what did you see of Monsieur Langston before his final broadcast? Lucy glanced around, her voice low. He was tense, sir, snapping at everyone more than usual. I heard him arguing with Mr. Blake in the green room, something about money. And then, when I brought tea to the studio, he was reading a letter, not like the usual fan ones. It looked plain, like it scared him. Poirot's fingers paused on his teacup. A plain letter, you say? Did you see its contents? No, sir, Lucy said, blushing. But he crumpled it up and threw it in the bin. I didn't touch it, I swear. Most interesting, Poirot murmured. And this argument with Monsieur Blake, what words did you hear? Lucy hesitated. Mr. Blake said something like, "You can't keep taking what's mine." And Victor laughed, called him a fool. That's all I heard before they saw me. Poirot smiled, slipping her a shilling. You have the eyes of an observer, mademoiselle. If you recall more, you will tell Poirot. Oui, as Lucy scurried off. Japp joined Poirot, his notebook open. Grayson's a ghost, all right. Last known address was a boarding house in Whitechapel, 1933. After that, nothing. But I've got men checking. What's this about a letter? Poirot tapped the typed letter from Reed. 2 letters, mon ami. One that frightened Langston, discarded, and this one a warning from the shadows. The past, it is not dead. It breathes in these words. We must find the crumpled letter in the studio, bin, and we must ask ourselves, who knew of Grayson's ruin, and who seeks to avenge it? The tea-room buzzed around them, but Poirot's mind was elsewhere, piecing together the echoes of a scandal that refused to stay buried. Chapter 5. The Mechanics of Sound. The control booth of the Imperial Broadcasting House was a fortress of technology, its walls lined with dials, switches, and coils of wire that hummed with latent energy. Hercule Poirot stood within, his immaculate suit a stark contrast to the cluttered chaos of the room. The air carried the faint scent of heated metal and ozone, a reminder of the unseen waves that had carried Victor Langston's final words to the world. Thomas Reed hovered nearby, his fingers twitching as if itching to adjust a knob, while Chief Inspector Japp lingered by the door, his scepticism palpable. Monsieur Reed, Poirot began, his voice precise as a metronome. You are the guardian of sound, oui? This booth, it is the heart of the broadcast. Explain to Poirot how it works, and how, perhaps, it might be made to lie. Reed pushed up his spectacles, his voice unsteady. Lie? The equipment doesn't lie, Monsieur Poirot. It captures what's said in the studio and sends it out. That's all. Poirot's eyes gleamed. And yet, a man is dead, shot in a locked room, with no gun to be found. The simplest explanation, it is not always the true one. Show me, if you please, the path of the sound. Reed hesitated, then gestured to the console. The microphones in the studio pick up the voices. Victor's, Edmund's. The signal comes here through these cables to the mixer. I adjust the levels, make sure it's clear. Then it goes to the transmitter, up to the antenna on the roof, and out to the listeners. Poirot traced a finger along a thick cable, his touch light as if coaxing a secret. And this process, it is always live. There is no way to delay or alter what the audience hears. Reed's cheeks flushed. "Well, we don't record broadcasts here. It's all live. But, theoretically, you could rig a delay with extra wiring, or play a pre-recorded sound through the mixer. It's complicated, though. You'd need to know the system inside out." Poirot's moustache twitched. "Complicated, yet not impossible. And you, Monsieur Reed, you know this system, do you not?" I do," Reed stammered. "But I didn't tamper with anything. Margaret was with me, watching the whole time." "Most interesting," Poirot murmured, turning to a small metal box tucked beneath the console. Its lid was slightly ajar, revealing a tangle of wires. "This box, what is its purpose?" Reed frowned, leaning closer. "That's just a junction for the microphone cables. It shouldn't be open like that. Someone's been messing with it." Japp stepped forward, his eyes narrowing. "Messing with it? You mean sabotaged?" "Perhaps," Poirot said, his tone measured. "Or perhaps it was meant to be found. Monsieur Reed, when did you last check this box?" "Before the broadcast," Reed said. "It was fine then, locked tight." Poirot's gaze flicked to the door, where Margaret Hale had appeared, her expression guarded. "Madam Hale, you were in this booth during the broadcast, oui? Did you see anyone approach this box?" Margaret shook her head, her voice crisp. "No, I was focused on the broadcast, making sure Victor didn't stray from the script. Thomas was at the controls the whole time." "And yet," Poirot said softly, "a shot was fired, and no one saw the hand that pulled the trigger. Tell me, madame, have you ever worked with recordings, perhaps in another studio?" Margaret's eyes flickered. "Years ago, at a smaller station. We experimented with wax discs, but they're clumsy, not practical for live shows." "Clumsy, yet possible," Poirot said, his voice almost a whisper. He turned back to Reed. "Monsieur, I would like to examine the studio microphones. A small matter, but Poirot, he is curious about the little things." In the studio, Poirot inspected the dangling microphones, their sleek forms glinting under the lights. He tapped one gently, producing a faint hum through the booth's speakers. Such sensitive creatures, these machines. They hear all, yet they do not judge. But what if they were made to hear something else? Reed, trailing behind, looked puzzled. "You mean like a fake sound? A gunshot, maybe?" Poirot smiled enigmatically. "A hypothesis, monsieur. For now, we collect the pieces of the puzzle." As they returned to the booth, Japp pulled Poirot aside, his voice low. "You're on to something, aren't you? This talk of recordings and delays, it's not just guesswork." Poirot's eyes sparkled. "The little grey cells, mon ami, they begin to dance. The murder, it was heard by thousands. But the question is not only who fired the shot, but when. And this letter." He patted his pocket, where the cryptic listener letter rested. "It speaks of sins, but also of timing. We must find the crumpled letter Mademoiselle Lucy saw, and we must ask, who in this station knows the art of bending sound?" Outside the booth, the station buzzed with activity. but Poirot's mind was a quiet storm, weaving together the threads of technology and treachery. Chapter 6. A Listener's Confession. The fog clung to London streets like a conspirator, muffling the clatter of hooves and the hum of late-night taxis. Hercule Poirot, his overcoat buttoned against the damp, stepped from a cab onto the slick cobblestones of Whitechapel. The address, a dingy pub called the Black Anchor, had come from an anonymous note slipped under the door of the Imperial Broadcasting House that afternoon. "Meet me at midnight. I know who killed Langston. Come alone." Chief Inspector Japp, insistent on joining, waited in the cab, his revolver at the ready, but his patience thin. "Madness, Poirot," Japp muttered through the cab window. "Chasing a note from some crackpot. It's a trap, mark my words." Poirot's moustache curved in a faint smile. "A trap, mon ami, is only dangerous if one steps blindly. The little grey cells, they are my lantern. Stay close, but unseen." The Black Anchor's sign creaked in the wind, its paint peeling like old skin. Inside, the air was thick with tobacco smoke and the sour tang of ale. A handful of patrons, dock workers mostly, huddled over their pints, their eyes flicking toward Poirot's polished shoes and immaculate moustache. He scanned the room, his gaze settling on a figure in the corner, a man in a worn overcoat, his face half hidden by a flat cap, nursing a glass of whisky. Poirot approached, his cane tapping lightly. "Monsieur," he said, his voice low but clear, "you are the one who wrote to Poirot, oui?" The listener with a confession. The man looked up, his eyes bloodshot but sharp. His face, lined with years of hardship, bore the weight of secrets. "You're the detective, then? The one they talk about?" His voice was rough with a faint tremor. "Sit, but keep your voice down." Poirot slid into the chair opposite, his posture impeccable. "I am Hercule Poirot. You claim to know the killer of Victor Langston. Speak, and let us see if your words hold truth." The man leaned forward, his whisky glass trembling in his hand. "I listened to Midnight Mysteries every week. Langston's voice, it was like silk, but it hid poison. I know what he did years ago to a man who trusted him, and I know someone wanted him dead for it." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "You speak of Arthur Grayson, perhaps? The partner Langston betrayed?" The man's jaw tightened, but he didn't deny it. "Grayson's name's part of it, but it's bigger than that. The killer's closer than you think. Someone at that station. They planned it, made it look impossible. But I heard something that night on the broadcast." Poirot leaned closer, his voice a whisper. "What did you hear, monsieur?" "A click," the man said, his voice dropping. "Just before the shot. Faint, like a switch or a relay. I used to work with radios, see? That sound, it wasn't right. The broadcast wasn't clean." Poirot's fingers tightened on his cane. "A click, you say? Most intriguing. And why come to Poirot now, in this place, instead of the police?" The man's eyes darted to the door. "Because they're watching. The killer, or someone helping them. I'm not safe, not after what I know. I only came because—" He stopped, his face paling as a shadow moved near the bar. Before Poirot could press further, the man shoved back his chair, spilling his whiskey. "I've said too much. Find the click, Poirot. It's the key." He bolted for the back door, vanishing into the fog. Poirot rose, but a heavy hand landed on his shoulder. A burly man, reeking of gin, loomed over him, his knuckles scarred. "You're asking too many questions, little man. Best leave it." Poirot's smile was icy. "And you, monsieur, are interfering with Hercule Poirot. A mistake." With a swift motion, he tapped his cane against the man's shin, eliciting a yelp. The thug stumbled, and Poirot slipped past, signalling Japp from the doorway. Japp burst in, his revolver drawn, but the thug had melted into the crowd, and the listener was gone. The pub's patrons stared, their silence heavy with unspoken warnings. Back in the cab, Japp fumed. "A waste of time, Poirot. Some drunks spinning yarns, and now we've got a brawler to chase. What's this about a click?" Poirot's eyes gleamed in the dark. "Not a waste, mon ami. The click, it is a clue, a whisper of the machine that lied. Our listener, he is frightened, but he has given us a thread. We must return to the station, find the crumpled letter Mademoiselle Lucy saw, and examine the equipment again. The truth, it hides in the sound, and someone at the Imperial Broadcasting House knows how to shape it." As the cab rattled through the fog, Poirot's mind raced, piecing together the listener's fear, the click, and the shadow of a killer who struck from nowhere. Chapter 7. The Alibi Unravels. The morning sun pierced the fog outside the Imperial Broadcasting House, casting long shadows through the station's high windows. Inside, the air was thick with tension, as Hercule Poirot gathered the suspects in the station's green room, a cosy space cluttered with scripts, ashtrays, and faded posters of midnight mysteries. Margaret Hale sat rigidly on a velvet chair, her hands clasped tightly. Edmund Blake leaned against a wall, his cigarette smoke curling like a question mark. Thomas Reed fidgeted near a tea tray, his spectacles fogging slightly. Chief Inspector Japp stood by the door, his notebook open, while Poirot, at the room's centre, commanded attention with his quiet intensity. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear as a bell, "we have a puzzle most curious. A man is dead, shot in a locked room, yet the killer leaves no trace. Each of you claims innocence, supported by alibis. But alibis, they are like glass, beautiful until they crack. Let us test their strength, we?" Margaret's eyes narrowed. "We've told you where we were, Monsieur Poirot. I was in the control booth with Thomas, and Edmund was in the studio. What more do you want?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "The truth, Madame Hale, is not always what is said, but what is left unsaid. Let us begin with you, Monsieur Blake. You were in the green room before the broadcast, rehearsing lines, seen by Madame Hale and Mademoiselle Lucy. But tell me, What time did you enter the studio? Blake exhaled smoke, his voice steady. 10 minutes to air, same as always. Victor was already there, fussing over his script. Margaret and Thomas were in the booth, setting up. Poirot tilted his head. And yet, Mademoiselle Lucy, she tells Poirot of an argument in the green room between you and Monsieur Langston about money. You can't keep taking what's mine, you said. A heated exchange, no? When did this occur? Blake's hand paused, the cigarette trembling slightly. That was earlier, maybe an hour before the broadcast. It was nothing, just Victor, being his usual greedy self. He'd been shorting my pay, claiming the show's budget was tight. We sorted it out. Sorted, Poirot repeated, his tone light but probing. Yet Mademoiselle Lucy, she places this argument closer to the broadcast, perhaps 30 minutes before, and she saw you leave the green room alone, while Monsieur Langston remained. Where did you go, Monsieur Blake? Blake's jaw tightened. To the lavatory, if you must know. I was back in the studio by 10 to 8, like I said. Poirot turned to Margaret. Madame Hale, you saw Monsieur Blake in the green room, oui? Can you confirm the time? Margaret hesitated, her fingers twisting her bracelet. I was in and out, checking the script. I saw Edmund there around 7, but I didn't watch the clock. I assumed he went straight to the studio. Assumed, Poirot said softly. A dangerous word. And you, Monsieur Reed? You were preparing the equipment. Did you see Monsieur Blake enter the studio? Reed pushed up his spectacles, his voice unsteady. I was in the booth, testing the mics. I didn't see Edmund come in, but I heard him on the mic just before we went live. He was there, I'm sure. Poirot's eyes gleamed. Heard, but not seen. Most interesting. Let us turn to another matter. The crumpled letter Mademoiselle Lucy saw Monsieur Langston discard. Inspector Japp, you searched the studio bin, oui? Japp nodded, producing a crumpled sheet from his pocket. Found it this morning, just like the girl said. Plain paper, typed, no signature. Reads, your time is running out. The past catches up. The room went still. Margaret's face paled. Blake's cigarette froze mid-air, and Reed's hands shook. Poirot took the letter, his gloved fingers smoothing it carefully. A second letter, Poirot said, similar to the one Monsieur Reed found, yet more direct. Monsieur Langston, he was warned, and he was afraid. Monsieur Blake, you argued with him about money, yet you did not mention this letter. Why? Blake stubbed out his cigarette, his voice sharp. I didn't know about any letter. Victor was always getting fan mail, half of it nonsense. If he was scared, he didn't tell me. Poirot's gaze shifted to Margaret. And you, madame, you sorted the listener letters. Did you see this one arrive? No, Margaret said quickly. I only saw the one Thomas showed me, about sins. Victor picked his own letters to read on air. Poirot turned to Reed. And you, monsieur, you sorted the mail. Yet this letter reached Monsieur Langston directly. How? Reed swallowed hard. "I don't know. Maybe it was delivered to his office. I only handle what comes through the main post." Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping the floor. An alibi cracks, a letter appears, and still the truth eludes us. "Monsieur Blake, your movements before the broadcast, they are unclear. 30 minutes unaccounted for, a gap where a man might act. But Poirot, he wonders, is this gap a clue or a distraction?" Blake's face reddened. "You're accusing me? I was in the studio when Victor was shot. Half of England heard me." "Oui," Poirot said, his voice soft but piercing. "Heard, but not seen. And the click, the one our listener heard before the shot. Perhaps it tells us what the eyes could not. For now, mes amis, remain here. The puzzle, it grows clearer, but the picture, it is not yet complete." As the suspects exchanged uneasy glances, Japp pulled Poirot aside. "You've got Blake on the ropes, Poirot. Think he's our man?" Poirot's eyes sparkled. "A man with a motive, a gap in his alibi, and a temper. Yet too obvious, no? The killer, he is cleverer than that. We must find the listener, and we must understand the click. The truth, mon ami, it is in the sound, and someone has played it like a symphony." Chapter 8. The Second Broadcast. The studio of Midnight Mysteries was a stage set for truth, its mahogany walls glowing under the soft lights, as Hercule Poirot orchestrated a reenactment of Victor Langston's final moments. The microphone hung above the polished table, a silent sentinel, while the control booth's glass pane reflected the nervous faces of the suspects. Margaret Hale stood at the mixer, her hands steady, but her eyes wary. Edmund Blake sat in his usual chair, his script clutched tightly, his charm replaced by a grim determination. Thomas Reed hovered over the equipment, his fingers trembling as he adjusted dials. Chief Inspector Japp, stationed near the door, watched with a mix of skepticism and hope. Poirot, at the centre of the studio, tapped his cane against the floor, his voice crisp. "Mes amis, we recreate the night of the murder, to hear what was heard, to see what was unseen. The broadcast, it was a performance, but within it lies a lie. Let us play our parts and find it. Monsieur Blake, you will read the script. Madame Hale, Monsieur Reed, you will operate the controls as before. And Poirot, he will listen." Margaret's voice was sharp. "This is absurd, Monsieur Poirot. We've told you everything. What do you expect to find?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "The truth, madame, is like a note in a symphony, easily missed yet essential. Begin, if you please." Blake cleared his throat. His voice strained as he read from the script. "And so, dear listeners, we come to the question that haunts every great mystery. Who stands to gain from a perfect crime?" He paused, mimicking Langston's theatrical flair. "My co-host, Mr. Edmund Blake, believes the answer lies in passion. But I say, greed, always greed." In the booth, Margaret adjusted the dials, her movements precise. Reed monitored the levels, his eyes flicking between the console and Poirot. The script continued, Blake's voice filling the room, until Poirot raised a hand. "Stop!" he said, his tone commanding. "Monsieur Reed, play the original broadcast, the moment before the shot. Amplify it, if you please." Reed hesitated, then cued the recording, a rare acetate disc preserved for the station's archives. The crackle of the broadcast filled the studio. Langston's smooth baritone, Blake's retort, and then a faint click, almost imperceptible, followed by the sharp crack of the gunshot. The room went still. Japp's eyes widened. "That's it! The click your pub fellow mentioned. What the devil is it?" Poirot's gaze was fixed on the booth. "A clue, mon ami, left by the machine. Monsieur Reed, what could cause such a sound?" Reed swallowed, his spectacles glinting. It could be a relay switching, or a tape starting. But we don't use tapes here, it's all live. Maybe a fault in the wiring, or a deliberate act," Poirot said softly. He turned to Margaret. "Madame Hale, you worked with recordings in the past. Could a sound, a gunshot perhaps, be inserted into a live broadcast?" Margaret's face tightened. "Theoretically, yes, with a phonograph or a wax disc. But it's risky. The timing would have to be perfect, and you'd need access to the mixer. I didn't touch anything like that." Poirot's eyes narrowed. "Yet the click, it suggests otherwise. Let us try again. Monsieur Blake, continue, but this time we add a sound, a clap from the booth. Monsieur Reed, you will trigger it." Reed fumbled with a small wooden clapper, his hands shaking. Blake resumed the script, and at Poirot's signal, Reed struck the clapper. The sound echoed through the speakers, sharp but distinct from the gunshot. Poirot listened intently, then gestured for the recording to play again. "There," he said, pointing as the click sounded. "The timing, it is too close to the shot. Not a fault, but a cue. Someone triggered something. A device, perhaps, hidden in the booth." Blake's voice was hoarse. "You're saying the shot wasn't real? That it was faked?" "Not faked, monsieur," Poirot said, his voice low, "but timed. The shot was real, but when it was fired, and by whom, that is the question. The click, it is the fingerprint of the killer's trick." Margaret stepped forward, her voice cold. "If you're accusing us, say it plainly. Thomas and I were in the booth, yes, but we didn't rig anything. And Edmund was right there in the studio." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Accuse? Non, madame. I observe. The click, it tells us the broadcast was not what it seemed. We must find the device that made it, and we must find our listener, who heard it first. For now, remain here. The symphony, it nears its crescendo." As the suspects dispersed, Japp pulled Poirot aside, his voice urgent. "You're on to the killer, aren't you? This click business, it's no accident." Poirot's eyes sparkled. "The little grey cells, they sing, mon ami. The click, it is the key to the impossible. But the killer, he is clever, hiding behind the sound. We must search the booth again, and we must trace the listener. The truth, it is close, but it wears a mask. The studio lights dimmed, but Poirot's mind burned bright, chasing the echo of a sound that had betrayed a murder at a chapter. Chun. The shadow of technology. The workshop of Dr. Ernest Caldwell was a shrine to the science of sound, tucked in a quiet corner of Bloomsbury. Shelves groaned under the weight of vacuum tubes, coils of wire, and disassembled radios, while the air hummed with the faint buzz of electricity. Hercule Poirot, his gloves spotless despite the clutter, stood beside a workbench where Caldwell, a wiry man with ink-stained fingers and a shock of white hair, peered through a magnifying glass at a tangle of circuits. Chief Inspector Japp paced nearby, his impatience barely contained. "Dr. Caldwell," Poirot said, his voice precise, "you are a maestro of the wireless, oui? Poirot seeks your expertise. A broadcast, it seems, has lied, and a man is dead. Tell me, can a live radio transmission be made to deceive?" Caldwell looked up, his eyes bright with curiosity. "Deceive? Oh, indeed, Monsieur Poirot. Radio is a marvel, but it's also a stage for illusion. With the right equipment, you can make listeners hear what isn't there, or believe something happened when it didn't." Poirot's moustache twitched. Most intriguing. In the case of Monsieur Langston, a gunshot was heard during a live broadcast, yet the killer left no trace. We have found a click, a sound before the shot, and a junction box tampered with. Could these be the fingerprints of trickery? Caldwell set down his magnifying glass, his voice animated. "A click, you say? That's a telltale sign. It could be a relay switching or a phonograph needle dropping. If someone spliced a pre-recorded sound, like a gunshot, into the broadcast, the click might mark the moment the device engaged. As for the junction box, it's the perfect place to hide a bypass circuit." Japp stopped pacing, his eyes narrowing. "You're saying the gunshot wasn't live? That it was played like a record?" "Possibly," Caldwell said, adjusting his spectacles. "You'd need a small phonograph or a magnetic wire recorder. Rare, but available. Feed the sound through the mixer, time it perfectly, and the audience would never know. The live voices would mask any seams." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "And the timing, it could be delayed. So the shot is heard later than it was fired." Caldwell nodded. "With a delay circuit, extra wiring to hold the signal for a few seconds, it's feasible. Tricky, but doable for someone who knows the system. The click could be the circuit activating." "Formidable," Poirot murmured. He produced a small sketch of the control booth's junction box, drawn from memory. This box, it was found, open with wires disturbed. Could it house such a device? Caldwell studied the sketch, his brow furrowing. Yes, easily. A compact recorder or a relay could fit inside. If the wires were rerouted, it could bypass the live feed for a moment, inserting the pre-recorded sound. I'd need to see it to be sure. Poirot turned to Japp. "Mon ami, we must return to the Imperial Broadcasting House and search the booth. Again, the device, it is the key to the impossible." Back at the station, the control booth was a hive of activity. Thomas Reed, summoned to assist, stood nervously as Poirot and Japp examined the junction box. The metal cover, now fully removed, revealed a nest of wires. And something else, a small cylindrical device, no larger than a cigarette case, tucked into a corner. Its surface bore a tiny spindle, like a miniature phonograph. Japp's jaw dropped. "Blimey, Poirot, you were right. What is that thing?" Poirot's gloved fingers lifted the device carefully, his voice soft. "A recorder, mon ami, or a piece of one. Monsieur Reed, you know this booth best. Have you seen this before?" Reed's face paled, his spectacles slipping. "No, never. That's not part of the system. Someone planted it, I swear." Margaret Hale, entering the booth, froze at the sight of the device. Her voice was sharp. "What's that? Thomas, you said the equipment was clean." "It was," Reed protested. "I checked it before the broadcast. That wasn't there." Poirot's gaze flicked between them. "Yet it is here now, and it speaks of a plan most clever. Madam Hale, you knew of recordings from your past work. Could you have overlooked such a device?" Margaret's eyes flashed. "I told you, I haven't worked with recordings in years, and I was watching the broadcast, not fiddling with wires." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Of course, madame, but the device, it required access to this booth. Access you and Monsieur Reed shared. And Monsieur Blake, he was nearby with time unaccounted for. The net, it tightens, no?" Japp clutched the device, his voice urgent. "We'll get this to Caldwell. Have him crack it open. If there's a recording inside, it might tell us who set it up." Poirot nodded, his mind racing. But we must also find our listener, who heard the click. And the letters, 2 warnings, 1 discarded, 1 kept. They point to a mind that planned not only murder, but deception. The killer, he is a conductor, and this device, it is his baton. As Japp barked orders to a constable, Poirot stepped to the booth's window, gazing at the empty studio. The microphone hung silently, but to Poirot it whispered of a truth hidden in the shadow of technology. Chapter 10. The Motive Unveiled. The tea-room of the Imperial Broadcasting House was a haven of warmth, its walls adorned with faded photographs of radio stars, but the air crackled with unease. Hercule Poirot sat at a small table, a cup of untouched tea before him, his eyes scanning a dossier Japp had procured from police archives. Across the room, Margaret Hale, Edmund Blake, and Thomas Reed waited under the watchful eye of a constable, their faces a gallery of suspicion and fear. Chief Inspector Japp, pacing near Poirot, clutched a telegram from Dr. Caldwell, his voice low. "Caldwell's cracked open that device, Poirot," Japp said, waving the telegram. "It's a miniature phonograph, all right, with a fragment of a gunshot sound on a wax cylinder. Someone rigged it to play during the broadcast, timed to the second. But who?" Poirot's moustache twitched as he closed the dossier. "Patience, mon ami. The device, it is the how, but the why. It is the heart of our puzzle. This dossier, It tells a story of betrayal, and it names a man we have sought. Arthur Grayson. Japp leaned closer. Grayson? The chap Langston ruined? You think he's behind this? Poirot's eyes gleamed. Not behind, perhaps, but within. Regardez, the scandal of 1932. Langston accused Grayson of embezzling funds from their show, planting false evidence. Grayson was dismissed, his career destroyed. But the dossier reveals more. Grayson had a sister, Eliza, who worked as a typist at the station. She too was dismissed and fell into poverty. She died last year, broken by shame. Japp's jaw tightened. So Grayson's got a double grudge, his ruin and his sister's death. But where is he? We've turned Whitechapel upside down, and he's a ghost. Before Poirot could answer, a constable burst in, his face flushed. Sir, we've found him, the listener from the pub. Caught him lurking near the station. Says his name's Henry Walsh. Poirot rose, his cane tapping lightly. Formidable. Bring Monsieur Walsh to us, and let us hear his tale. Moments later, Henry Walsh was ushered in, his worn overcoat and flat cap unchanged from the black anchor. His bloodshot eyes darted between Poirot and the suspects, his hands trembling. Poirot gestured to a chair, his voice gentle but firm. Monsieur Walsh, you fled from Poirot in Whitechapel, yet you return. You spoke of a clique, of a killer at the station. Now, speak plainly. Who are you, and what do you know? Walsh swallowed, his voice hoarse. I'm nobody, just a radio man who lost his way. Used to work with Grayson years ago, before Langston ruined him. I listened to Midnight Mysteries every week, hating Langston's voice. Then I got a letter, anonymous, typed. It said Langston would pay, and I should watch the broadcast, listen for the truth. Poirot's eyes narrowed. This letter, where is it? Walsh fumbled in his pocket, producing a crumpled sheet. The typed words read, Listen at midnight. The click will reveal the justice you seek. No signature like the others. Japp snatched the paper. Another blasted letter. This is a conspiracy, Poirot. Oui, Poirot said softly. But a conspiracy with a puppet master. Monsieur Walsh, you heard the click, and you came to Poirot. Why? Walsh's voice broke. Because I owed Grayson. He was good to me before it all fell apart. I thought, maybe he was behind it, getting revenge. But I'm no killer. I just listened like the letter said. Poirot's gaze shifted to the suspects, who sat frozen. And you, mes amis, what do you know of Grayson? Madame Hale, you were at the station in 1932. Did you know him or his sister? Margaret's face was pale, her voice steady but strained. I knew Eliza vaguely. She was quiet, efficient. I heard about the scandal, but I was just a junior producer then. I had no part in it. Blake snorted, his voice bitter. Langston bragged about it once when he was drunk. Said Grayson was a fool who didn't see the knife coming. I didn't care. Old news. Reed fidgeted, his spectacles slipping. I wasn't here then. I only started in 34. I never met Grayson." Poirot's smile was enigmatic. "Yet the past, it binds you all. The letters, the device, the click, they point to a motive born of betrayal. Monsieur Walsh, you are a pawn, sent to Poirot to muddy the waters. But the killer? He is among us, or close by. Inspector, where is Mademoiselle Lucy?" Japp blinked. "The tea-girl. She's in the kitchen, I think." "Fetch her," Poirot said, his tone sharp. "She sees much, and her words may cut through the shadows." As Japp sent for Lucy, Poirot paced, his mind a whirlwind. The motive, Grayson's ruin, Eliza's death, was clear, but the killer's hand remained hidden. The letters, the device, and Walsh's role pointed to a plan far cleverer than a simple act of revenge. The truth, Poirot knew, was a single note away from clarity. Chapter 11. The Final Confrontation. The studio of Midnight Mysteries was a theatre of truth, its mahogany walls absorbing the tension as Hercule Poirot stood before the microphone, his small frame radiating authority. The suspects, Margaret Hale, Edmund Blake, Thomas Reed, and Henry Walsh, sat in a semicircle, their faces etched with dread. Lucy, the tea-girl, hovered near the door, her wide eyes darting between them. Chief Inspector Japp, flanked by two constables, clutched the miniature phonograph device, his notebook bulging with scribbled clues. The air was heavy, the silence broken only by the faint hum of the studio lights. "Mes amis," Poirot began, his voice clear and resonant, "we stand in the place where Victor Langston met his end. A murder heard by thousands, yet seen by none. A locked room, a missing gun, a click before the shot. These are the notes of a symphony most cunning. Tonight, Poirot will conduct, and the truth it will sing." Margaret's voice was icy. "Get on with it, Monsieur Poirot. We've answered your questions, played your games. What do you claim to know?" Poirot's moustache twitched. "Patience, Madame Hale. The crime? It is a puzzle of time and sound. Let us reconstruct. Monsieur Langston was shot, the door locked, the gun gone. Yet the broadcast, it was not what it seemed. Monsieur Reed, you found a device in the junction box, a phonograph, oui?" Reed nodded, his spectacles glinting nervously. "Yes, but I didn't put it there. It played the gunshot, like you said." "Précisément," Poirot said. "The gunshot, it was pre-recorded, triggered during the broadcast to create the illusion of a live murder. But the true shot, it was fired earlier, before the broadcast began. The killer, he delayed the signal, using a circuit hidden in the booth, so the audience heard the shot later, when all were accounted for." Blake's face reddened. "That's madness! I was in the studio, right across from Victor. If he'd been shot earlier, I'd have seen it." Poirot's eyes gleamed. "Would you, Monsieur Blake? Or were you distracted, perhaps by your anger? Mademoiselle Lucy, tell Poirot what you saw before the broadcast, when you brought tea to the studio." Lucy stepped forward, her voice trembling but clear. "Mr. Langston was alone, sir, reading a letter. He looked scared. Mr. Blake came in just as I left, about 10 minutes before the show. I didn't see anything else." Poirot nodded. "And yet, Monsieur Blake, you argued with Langston earlier about money. Your alibi, it has gaps. But Poirot suspects you are not the killer, only a witness unaware of the trick." Blake's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. Poirot turned to Margaret. "Madame Hale, you knew of recordings from your past. You were in the booth with access to the device. The letters, warnings of Langston's sins, did you write them to frighten him?" Margaret's eyes flashed. "I told you, I didn't touch that device, and I didn't write any letters. I was running the broadcast, not plotting murder." Poirot's gaze shifted to Reed. "Monsieur Reed, you know the booth's secrets. The device, it required skill to install, skill you possess, and you sorted the letters, yet one reached Langston directly. Did you seek revenge, perhaps for his tyranny?" Reed's voice cracked. "No, I'm no killer. I checked the equipment, but I didn't see that device until you found it." Poirot paced, his cane tapping rhythmically. 3 letters, a device, a click, and a motive. Arthur Grayson's ruin, his sister's death. Monsieur Walsh, you were Grayson's friend, sent to Poirot as a pawn. But the killer, he is not Grayson nor Walsh. The killer is here, among us." He paused, his eyes locking on Margaret. "Madame Hale, your alibi depends on Monsieur Reed, but Poirot has learned more. Mademoiselle Lucy, she saw you leave the booth briefly, just before the broadcast, to check the script. Time enough to activate the device. And the letters, typed like those from 1932, when you worked with Eliza Grayson. You knew her, loved her, as a sister. Her death, it broke you, did it not?" Margaret's face drained of colour. "You're wrong. I barely knew Eliza. I had no reason to kill Victor." Poirot's voice was relentless. "Non, madame. You blamed Langston for Eliza's ruin, for her death. You learned of recordings, of delays, and you planned a murder most perfect. You shot Langston before the broadcast, in the studio, when Blake was away. You hid the gun, perhaps in the ceiling tiles to be retrieved later. The device played the shot. The delay masked the time, and the locked room. It was your alibi." Margaret stood, her voice a hiss. "Prove it, Poirot. You have no evidence." Poirot's smile was cold. "The gun, madame, it will be found. And the typewriter in your office, it matches the letters. You underestimated Poirot, and you underestimated Mademoiselle Lucy, whose eyes saw the truth." Japp signalled the constables, who moved toward Margaret. She staggered back, her composure crumbling. I did it for Eliza. Victor destroyed. Her laughed about it. He deserved to die." The room erupted in gasps. Blake swore, Reed clutched his spectacles, and Walsh bowed his head. Lucy's eyes filled with tears, but she stood firm. Poirot's voice softened. "Justice, madame, is not vengeance. You played a clever game, but the little grey cells, they do not sleep." As Margaret was led away, Japp clapped Poirot's shoulder. "You've done it again, old chap. But how did you know it was her?" Poirot's eyes twinkled. The letters, the device, the motive, they pointed to one with access and knowledge. But the final note, mon ami, is yet to play. There is one more secret in this symphony. Chapter 12. The Twist of the Knife. The studio of Midnight Mysteries was a silent witness to justice. Its lights dimmed as the weight of Margaret Hale's confession settled over the room. She stood, handcuffed, her face a mask of defiance and despair, flanked by constables. Edmund Blake slouched in his chair, his cigarette unlit, while Thomas Reed clutched his spectacles, his relief palpable. Henry Walsh, the listener, stared at the floor, his role as a pawn now clear. Chief Inspector Japp, notebook in hand, turned to Hercule Poirot, his voice gruff but admiring. "You've outdone yourself, Poirot," Japp said, gesturing to Margaret. "The gun's being searched for in the ceiling tiles, and we've got the typewriter from her office. It's a done deal. But what's this about? Another secret?" Poirot's eyes gleamed, his moustache curving in a faint, enigmatic smile. "Patience, mon ami. The symphony, it has played its loudest notes, but the final chord, it is the most subtle. Madame Hale, she pulled the trigger, driven by vengeance for Eliza Grayson. But Poirot, he asks, who lit the spark? Who wove the threads of this deception?" Margaret's head snapped up, her voice sharp. "What are you talking about? I acted, alone. I hated Victor for what he did to Eliza. No one else was involved." Poirot paced slowly, his cane tapping the polished floor. "Non, madame. You were the instrument, but another held the baton. The letters, typed precise, sent to Langston, to Monsieur Walsh, and kept by you, they were not your work. The device, so cleverly hidden, required knowledge beyond your own. And the timing so perfect. It was a plan too grand for one mind alone." Blake snorted, his voice bitter. "You're chasing shadows, Poirot. Margaret's confessed. What more do you want?" Poirot's gaze swept the room, settling on Lucy, who stood near the door, her apron twisted in her hands, her wide eyes brimming with tears. "Mademoiselle Lucy," he said softly, "you have been the quiet observer, seeing all, saying little, yet your words, they have guided Poirot. Tell me, what is your true name?" The room froze. Lucy's tears vanished, her posture straightening as a faint smile curled her lips. Her voice, no longer trembling, was clear and cold. "You're clever, Monsieur Poirot. My name is Lucy Grayson. Eliza was my mother." A collective gasp filled the studio. Japp's notebook slipped from his hand. Blake swore, and Reed's spectacles fell to the floor. Margaret's face twisted in shock, her voice a whisper. "Grayson! No! It can't be!" Poirot's voice was relentless. "Oui, Madame Hale. Lucy Grayson, daughter of Eliza, niece of Arthur Grayson. You came to this station, disguised as a tea-girl, to avenge your family. You knew of Margaret's loyalty to your mother, her guilt over her death. You wrote the letters, planting fear in Langston and rage in Margaret. You built the device, using skills learned from your uncle, a radio man. You manipulated the broadcast, ensuring the gunshot played at the perfect moment. Lucy's smile widened, her eyes gleaming with defiance. You have no proof, monsieur. Margaret killed him. I'm just a girl who served tea. Poirot's smile was icy. No, mademoiselle. The typewriter in Madame Hale's office. It was used for the letters, but your fingerprints, they are on the keys. The device, it bears a maker's mark, traceable to a shop in Whitechapel where you were seen. And Monsieur Walsh, he received a letter you sent, guiding him to Poirot, to distract us. Your plan was brilliant, but you underestimated the little grey cells. Lucy's composure cracked, her voice rising. Victor destroyed my family. He ruined my uncle, drove my mother to her grave. Margaret was my tool, yes, but she wanted justice too. I gave her the means, the courage. I'd do it again. Margaret lunged forward, stopped by the constables. You used me, Lucy. You let me think it was my idea. Lucy's eyes were cold. You loved my mother. You hated Victor. All I did was show you the path. Japp signalled the constables, who moved toward Lucy. That's enough, miss. You're under arrest, both of you. Poirot raised a hand, his voice calm. A moment, Inspector. Mademoiselle Lucy, your vengeance, it was a masterpiece of deception. But it has ended. The truth, it is a light that no shadow can escape. As Lucy and Margaret were led away, the studio fell silent. Blake lit his cigarette, his hands shaking. Reed retrieved his spectacles, his voice a whisper. She was just the tea girl. Japp turned to Poirot, his voice awed. How did you know, Poirot? She was invisible. Poirot's eyes twinkled. The invisible, mon ami, are often the most dangerous. Lucy's eyes, they saw too much. Her words too precise. The letters, the device, the motive. They pointed to a mind that planned. From the shadows, Poirot, he listens to the silence, and there he finds the truth. Chapter 13. The Resolution. The Imperial Broadcasting House stood quiet under a grey London sky, its grand facade a mute witness to the drama that had unfolded within. Hercule Poirot sat in the station's tea-room, a steaming cup of tisane before him, its herbal scent a small comfort after the storm of revelation. Chief Inspector Japp, his notebook finally closed, slumped in a chair opposite, his tie loosened and his face etched with weary satisfaction. The suspects, Edmund Blake, Thomas Reed, and Henry Walsh, had been released after giving statements, their roles as bystanders or pawns confirmed. Margaret Hale and Lucy Grayson were in custody, their fates sealed by their own confessions. Japp sipped his tea, his voice gruff. Well, Poirot, you've done it again. Margaret Hale, the killer, and Lucy Grayson, the puppeteer, both locked up, and the gun found right where you said, in the studio's ceiling tiles. But I'm still reeling. How did a slip of a girl like Lucy pull it off? Poirot's moustache curved in a faint smile, his eyes distant. The little grey cells, mon ami, they see what the heart conceals. Lucy Grayson, she was no ordinary girl. Her mother's death, her uncle's ruin, they forged a mind both brilliant and vengeful. She came to the station as Lucy, the tea-girl, invisible to all, yet watching everything. Japp leaned forward, his curiosity unabated. But the details, Poirot. How did she manage the device, the letters, all of it? Poirot set down his cup, his voice measured. Let us unravel the threads, we? Lucy. She learned the art of radio from her uncle, Arthur Grayson, a man skilled in the craft before his fall. She built the phonograph device, a marvel of miniaturization, and hid it in the junction box. The gunshot, recorded from a pistol she later concealed, was triggered during the broadcast, its click betraying the switch. And the delay? Japp asked. That broadcast trick still boggles me. A simple circuit, Poirot said, rerouting the signal through extra wiring, delaying it by seconds. Lucy installed it during her quiet moments in the booth, unnoticed. The live voices of Monsieur Blake and Langston masked the seam, and the audience, they heard a murder that had already happened. Japp frowned. So Margaret shot Langston before the broadcast. Oui, Poirot said. Lucy, she stoked Margaret's hatred, using letters typed on a machine in Margaret's own office. A cruel irony. The first letter to Langston sowed fear. The second, to Margaret, fanned her rage. The third, to Monsieur Walsh, ensured Poirot would chase the click, a distraction from Lucy's hand. Margaret, believing she acted alone, shot Langston in the studio moments after Monsieur Blake left for the lavatory. Lucy locked the door, activated the device, and the rest, it was a performance. Japp whistled, and Lucy's fingerprints on the typewriter clinched it. But why risk it all? She could have stayed hidden. Poirot's gaze softened, a rare flicker of melancholy. Vengeance, mon ami, is a fire that consumes. Lucy saw her mother's shame, her uncle's despair. She could not rest until Langston paid. Yet, in her brilliance, she overlooked one truth. The innocent, like Mademoiselle Lucy, are never truly invisible to Poirot. Japp chuckled, shaking his head. You're a marvel, Poirot. What's next? Back to your armchair by the fire? Poirot rose, adjusting his hat with precision. For now, yes, but the world, it is full of deceptions. And the little grey cells, they do not sleep. This case, it reminds Poirot of the power of sound, to charm, to deceive, to betray. We live in an age of voices, Japp, and we must listen carefully. They stepped into the bustling street. The station's antenna loomed above, a silent sentinel of the airwaves. Margaret Hale faced trial for murder. Her loyalty to Eliza Grayson, her undoing. Lucy Grayson, the mastermind, would answer for conspiracy, her youth no shield from justice. Blake and Reed returned to their work, shaken but free, while Walsh faded back to Whitechapel, his debt to Grayson paid in silence. Poirot paused, his cane gleaming in the pale light. The radio, mon ami. It brings the world to our ears, but it is the heart that speaks the truth, and the truth, it is a melody that never fades. With a tip of his hat, Poirot walked into the fog, leaving the echoes of the case to linger in the air.